Welcome, everybody, to the Career Invincibility Radio Show. I'm your host, Christine Paracas, and I have an incredible guest with us here today that is going to bring so much value and ideas and resources that we can all take and put into action immediately. So we've got Verne Harnish with us, who's the Growth Guy syndicated columnist. He's a venture columnist for Fortune magazine, the author of the internationally renowned Scaling Up: How a Few Companies Make It and Why the Rest Don't. If you don't own a copy of this book, I urge you after this show, go out and get yours. He's also been the author of the Rockefeller Habits, along with the editors of Fortune, authored The Greatest Business Decisions of All Time that Jim Collins wrote the foreword for, and continues to chair the Fortune magazine's annual Leadership and Growth Summits, and serves on several boards, including chairman of the Reardon Clinic and the newly launched Geodiversity. Scaling Up is in 6 continents, the 150 coaching partners, and Verne has spent the last 3 decades helping companies scale up, and we get to share with him. He's going to share with us his wisdom today. Welcome, Verne. Thank you so much for being here.
Christine, glad to be on the show, and thank you for all that you're doing to help, again, who I consider the first responders always to the economy, the scale-ups. You know, they generate all the jobs and the innovation that make things happen, and did that out of the last recession, and they're going to need to do it again over the next couple of years.
Well, and here we are, right? We are still in the throes of whatever this thing is going to be, the global pandemic, and there's going to be another storm. And I can imagine, like many of us, we're all wondering what to do now. Right? In some way, some of us are literally having to start over, or to make a big pivot, or to figure out how to make the most of this opportunity. Well, hopefully all of us are that, but at least to be able to capitalize on what they already have going. So maybe we could talk today about how you would advise these people in these different areas that we talk about in your book, Scaling Up.
Well, and you're right. And I think in a couple of words, it's to be ambitious. And I wish I could take credit for that. But the very first virtual summit we did, Christine, we hosted Margaret Heffernan. You know, Margaret was a top 100 software CEO, was at the BBC before that. And she just literally this week launched her book in the US called Uncharted. It couldn't be a more prescient title. And so we hosted her, and she said, that is the key thing to do. And we've been doing it ourselves. This is the time to be ambitious. And so we actually put together kind of a temporary site called scalingforward.com. And we said, look, there's 4 decisions that you need to be making right now here in 2020 as you power through over the next 24 months. And maybe we can dig into those.
Please, let's do it. I'm all ears.
So anyway,
that's scaling for FOUR.
Scaling forward. So you can't go back. There's no going back. Some are scaling up, some have had to scale down, but we all have to continue to be scalingforward.com. Yeah. And so anyway,
I want to make sure our listeners can find it.
Look at. You bet. So, our framework: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And so we really wanted to dig into 4 specific ideas. And so under the people, it really was an idea that I learned from Regis McKenna, who coached Steve Jobs in Intel and Genentech. And I was just a student at Wichita State when I had this idea. I wanted to launch the world's largest entrepreneurship organization, which is EO today. And what he taught Steve Jobs was, anytime you want to get anything done, take a piece of paper out and put down a list of the top 25 influencers that you need to get behind your idea. And that's what we've really been recommending. And the bigger the names, the faster you're going to be able to scale. So I remember back then, we're talking about the 80s, I wrote down President Ronald Reagan and Steve Jobs himself and Michael Dell and Inc. Magazine and Venture, and it was crazy. Working that list of 25 within 36 months, this idea for this global entrepreneurship group went from an idea to global that quickly. And so we were able to structure in the middle of this crisis a partnership with Harvard. There's No way we could have probably gotten that deal done in the previous 12 years because everybody's hair has been on fire. But with this crisis, you can actually get a hold of people you normally wouldn't be able to reach and structure these kind of ambitious opportunities. So we think step number one is take a piece of paper out and say, all right, if I were to be ambitious with this business, who would I partner with? Who would I get on board? What talent can I grab? We've launched a new business in this pandemic, and we were able to get a CTO that never would have been available at any other time. So that's the first in terms of people.
Wow, that's amazing, because what I hear is how high you aimed. And I don't know if you had a pre-existing relationship with Steve Jobs or some of these other people on your list, or you just went for it and said, I'm going to say it, put it on my list.
I was a student at Wichita State University, Christine. In the middle of Kansas.
Family friends.
Yeah, so I'll be very precise. And I still use the technique today. There are people I want to reach. We're hosting at our event next week, Richard Branson, the co-founder of Airbnb. I mean, it's a star-studded lineup, and I didn't know those people, and they're still difficult to access. But if you put them on your list and then begin to work the list, it's amazing what you can accomplish. I wanted to get the owner of Venture Magazine, who's still a good friend here 4 decades later, on board. And so I'd read that he was giving a speech in Dallas, and I got in my 81 Pontiac and drove south 6 hours. And you just have to have a good elevator pitch and then listen and respond appropriately. Today, I encourage people to use Google Alerts. And so I wanted to get to Greg Brenneman, the top turnaround guy in the world, turned around Continental Airlines and all of that. So I just added Greg to my Google Alerts. News started popping about him. You get to know their assistant, and you begin to communicate with them about their favorite topic, them. And if you've got any kind of chutzpah, and I've got a friend that's writing a book about that right now, then they're going to pay attention. And then it's just for you. There's a lot more to this, but it starts with making the list. And if you don't start big, you're not going to be big.
Well, that's super powerful. And it seems like, whenever you put your mind to something, so you've got it in writing, you've got your brain, your hands, everybody's working, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. Would that all play into it? Do you think that somehow the opportunities find themselves their way to you?
It does. And there's so much written about that you're well aware of, and I am, but it's real. We know that you have to speak about it, by the way. You can't think your way through this crisis. You have to talk your way through it. And we're a being that created the spoken word about 100,000 years ago. The written word's only 5,000 years old, and Excel spreadsheets are only about 35 years old. So I think I know what we're much more highly evolved in order to accomplish something, and that is through talking about it and setting vibrations. And you've experienced it, Christine. There's somebody you haven't talked to for years. They came up in a conversation over the weekend, and out of the blue, they reached out to you. And it literally, as your ears were ringing.
Absolutely.
So we know it's real, but we don't need to get into all the specifics. Let's move on to strategy.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
So here, you've got a real opportunity in this pandemic to create a new category within your industry, a new brand. In essence, strategy is figuring out what word or two you can own in the minds of enough people in the market that you can scale up. So for instance, Google owns the word search in your mind. And by the way, the reason they took that from Yahoo, and the minute Yahoo lost that word, they never recovered, because people need to understand what job you can do for them. The late Clayton Christensen's favorite strategy question: what is the job, for instance, of a milkshake? And only when you understand that can you innovate with it. So we did something similar. We know that this COVID crisis has launched industries like the Gulf War launched CNN, one of those being distance learning. My children started back to school today. One of them, is having to do it, completely distant. And so we created a new category called near learning. that is a spin on distance learning. And we're in the process of gathering investors and really spinning up what we think is going to be a significant, ambitious opportunity in this pandemic. But it started with creating a new category, what it's one or two new words, like enhanced waters, what Darius Bikoff did when he added vitamin C to water and created the first new beverage category in 25 years, which he sold to Coke for $4.1 billion. I don't know about you, Christine. I just wish I'd figured out to add vitamins to water instead of sometimes, the dumb stuff that I'm involved with. Who would have thunk? But strategies about the word or two, the new category you have an opportunity to create within your existing industry. So that's strategy.
So it's very simple, doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't even have to be your original word, right? Or original to you.
Correct. I think of Blue Canary. They're a company, Dan Ryan and his partner, Mike, they've been for the last 20 years providing kind of cleaning and safety services for the medical field. Well, as hospitality has come back online, particularly boutique hotels, they said, why don't we pivot into a service that we can provide for that industry? And they have. And they've created a new brand called Canary Cares. And what's interesting, Blue Canary is a term that we give to medical first responders. And they're now bringing that same expertise to the boutique hotel industry with a whole new product line and category. And they just got a major write-up in the Boston Globe for a boutique hotel that launched about a month ago that said, hey, we couldn't have without this Canary Cares trademarked safety service.
Wow, that's fantastic. So it doesn't take a lot. It's just a moment of inspiration.
It does. Well, and they've been, longstanding clients of ours. They know our tools. We have what's called the 770 rule, which is you don't want to go after the whole market. That's one of the mistakes everybody makes. You want to go after the 10% that has all the money right now. And they knew the large hotels aren't coming back anytime soon, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, and those. And they identified 3,000 boutique hotels in the United States. And then they said, let's target the 7% of them that we think have the best shot of being the busiest and open the quickest. And that's what we call the 770 rule. There's usually 7% of a market that represents about 70% of the profitability. And it's stupid to go after anyone else. Let the other 93% go to your competition. So there's some detail behind this, but sure, that's the simplest. If we then move to execution, here we feel the real focus has got to be, and this doesn't seem, it shouldn't be that obviously simple, but it's time to really digitize and improve your processes. Small to mid-sized companies, Christine, are super inefficient, and witnessed by a very simple thing, revenue per employee. The average for mid-market's about $126,000 per employee. The Fortune 500 are almost $500,000. So even though they're these big bloated bureaucracies, they're 4 times better at generating $1 revenue than we are as these lean, mean fighting machines. And so it's time to really focus on the digitization of your processes. And it's been really pushed because many of us have been remote. So for instance, we implemented, and I've got our next training scheduled for next week, we're instituting Atlassian's Confluence, this kind of Wikipedia technology within our own company so that we stop this, what I call scavenger hunt. Somebody says, hey, where is this document? And was it in Slack? Was it, in a shared Google Doc? Was it in, half a dozen other places? And you can't imagine how much wasted time there is just doing these scavenger hunts inside our company. So this is the time